Hello and welcome to video 8 of Life Unlimited, 10 Steps to Real Change. In this video, what I'm going to be talking about is your guide, investing in your guide. Up until now, I've been talking about threat, reward, connection, what each of those parts means, how they work, how we want to put more energy into connection generally. Certainly our tendency is for dominant threat, probably for dominant reward as well, and how the energy comes out of connection, unless we deliberately and consciously try and do something different now. But all of these parts are inextricably bound together. And therefore thoughts, feelings, body and behaviour all inextricably bound together as well, but we want them all to work together for our common good. So as I've said, we don't want to turn against any part. We want to have each part valued, to understand its value, but also for there to be a part that's managing that process internally. So we have threat, reward and connection, and what I'm now going to do is talk about that part which I'll call the guide, which is managing those. So when it notices fear coming forward and it notices fears catastrophizing, when I'm talking about the thoughts and noticing fearful thoughts, catastrophizing thoughts, pervasive personalizing thoughts, that it's going to say, it's going to notice that's happening and move connection in instead, that it's going to sort of talk fear back and move connection in more. So no magic buttons or switches there. This isn't something that's inborn with people. I don't think this guide part is something that's developed over life. We have the fear, we have the anger, we have the impulses, the drives, and I think this part that overlooks them, stands over them and makes sure that they're working in a way that works for us, that's really working for us. I think that is developed and modelled to us over time by caregivers. And of course, if somebody has a dominant threat or dominant reward, so the fact that a part has been allowed to dominate internally or is able to dominate is of course our physiology as well, which I've explained, but it's also to do with the fact, I think, that nobody modelled how to manage those parts, so how to make threat a bit smaller in a compassionate and gentle way, how to make reward a bit smaller in a compassionate and gentle way, if that's our difficulty. Sometimes it will be connection. People fall in love with people who they, in inverted commas, shouldn't fall in love with, because if there's dominant threat internally, a lot of fear and anger, the way to help ourselves to feel good is to fall in love with other people. As I've already talked about, that's not always a good idea for us in the medium to long term, depending on who it is. So it may even be that the connection part needs to be managed. But who is doing this managing, or what part is doing this managing in addition to the threat, reward and connection? What's pulling the levers? What's observing what's happening internally, noticing and managing that, letting go of unhelpful threat thoughts, enhancing connection feelings, making them bigger in the body in the way that I've talked about, choosing our behaviours. When fear says avoid that situation because people don't like you, people are dangerous, what's the part that says, that brings connection in and says, well, let's go towards it, let's feel the fear and do it anyway here. They're good people, they're nice people, we like them, this is going to be okay. What's the part that's doing that? Well, I, as I say, call that your guide. So that's the bit that we're going to talk about now in this video, and that I'm going to focus on putting more energy into. It's your filtering system between your three parts and your internal and external world. So threat, reward and connection are all internally negotiating, and they're also needing to negotiate with getting their needs met with the external world as well. So there is a part of you, and I'd say that's the guide, that's doing that. It's deciding what part might cause a problem. Often the threat part for us, sometimes reward. If there's addiction and dependencies, it's that being too dominant that's problematic. And as I've just said, even occasionally it might be the connection part, as far as falling in love with other people, that we can never love ourselves too much, but we certainly might fall in love with somebody else, which could be problematic for us. So it's deciding, this guide, which part should step back and kind of negotiate that stepping back as well. So it decides what you avoid, which is the threat part, what you approach, which is the reward part, and what you attach to, which is the connection part. In the meantime, always trying to balance your nervous system. Again, the guide has that in mind. The guide is about balance, is about equilibrium, is about managing and achieving and attaining that internal balance all the time. And with a strong guide, I believe you hold the power you need to make yourself happy, because whatever happens inside you happens your way. So, of course, as I've said, the fear and anger at times can be intrusive and automatic. That survival system jumps forward, and that isn't within our control. And to blame ourselves for that is going to be problematic. But once it's come in, we do then have a choice over it, as long as we're noticing it, and then we can decide what we're going to do with it and how we're going to process what's happening for us. But as long as, with a strong guide, whatever's happening inside you is within your control, then really whatever happens is happening your way. In most of situations, it isn't necessarily the external trigger that's problematic, is what we do with it internally, particularly with dominant threat. As I've already said, it's the stories that anger tells us. It's the reactive behaviour. It's reacting in anger. It's fighting with people. Or even through fear, another characteristic of the dominant threat part, not putting in boundaries, not voicing if we're annoyed about something in a calm and assertive way. So with this strong guide, we have all the power we need. It's not power over others. What we're looking at here is power over ourselves, and not in a dominant way, but in a way that everything is working in alignment, everything is valued, everything within us is kind of negotiated with, and is we understand what each part is trying to do, and empathize with that part, but also make it clear what parts are going to be able to step forward and what's in our best interest. Mostly, as I've said, is going to be deliberately focusing on connection from this point. So other words for the guide, which I think in various other kind of therapeutic practices or even spiritual beliefs, I would say the emotional processor part, I think it's the center of us. It's the part that keeps us centered. The amygdala whisperer, the fear and anger part, the fight flight part sits, as I've said, in the amygdala. So it's the part that whispers to that. And I think whisper is an important word to use there, because it's going to be talking to that part compassionately. It's going to be talking to that part gently but firmly. We're not, if you shout at the amygdala, it's more of the same. As I've talked about, that kick, give it a kick up the backside, get frustrated with yourself, guilt, shame, regret. It's more of the same. So we're looking at whispering to it. We're looking at talking to it firmly but calmly. Again, the guide, I think, is the observing self, the part that's observing what's happening with these parts, knowing what's happening in your thoughts, feelings and behaviour, and then making some choices once we've got awareness around it. And lastly, I would say, you could see it as your buffer, the buffer between threat, reward and connection, and the needs that they have to meet, and your external environment. And the buffer between each of them, actually. So we don't want to be reacting in them and from them all the time, just sort of jumping between them whenever. We need a buffer. And I think the guide provides that. Everything that you've explored so far that we've looked at in these videos means that the guide is present. You already have one. To negotiate anything as far as relationships, to organise things, to plan things. If you're looking at these earlier videos, to notice your thoughts, if you started to do that, to notice what you feel, to look at your values, to get conscious about your beliefs, it's all the guide that's helping with that. So you absolutely have one present. You are negotiating your internal parts in relationship with people outside and experiences all the time, whether that's personally and professionally. So it's there. We're actually, again, just making conscious its existence and also putting more energy into it. What does your guide need? Which is very key here. We're looking at attention going inwards. If your guide is going to guide you, is going to decide what's going to happen with threat, reward, connection in any situation, what's going to happen with your thoughts, feelings, bodies and behaviour in any situation, it needs to have attention inwards. As we know, threat, reward often turn our attention outwards. Threat, scanning the environment, that hypervigilance. Reward, what can I see in terms of behaviours or substances that's going to change what's happening internally. So a lot of it's driving us out. Anger drives us out to other people. How can they do that? Why would they behave like that? Why would they treat me like that? I would never do the things that they do, those kind of things. So this guide is going to take the energy down, calmer, more reflective, turning attention inwards so that we can know what's happening internally, notice what's happening, can see when we look at our feelings that I've talked in the past, what we love, can see who we struggle around, who dysregulates us, and then goes out to the world with that information. But we have to drop inside. We need silence. We need calmness. We need to be able to know what's happening. That sort of dual attention inside, as well as attention to some other person who we're in relationship, if that's what we're talking about. A situation where we're around other people. We need that guide looking in, always having an eye inside at what's happening, and then go out to the world with that. And it needs contact, therefore, with the here and now. A lot of, the threat stuff is about reach forward and afterburn. What's going to happen? Solving problems. What am I going to do to solve that problem today? Identifying problems. Or the afterburn. Why did I do that? That person doesn't like me. I've offended them, whatever that might be. The guide is going to be directing our attention much more to the here and now, much more to the present moment where things are good enough, where you're safe. Mostly psychologically and physically, we are absolutely safe. So turning our attention to the present moment much more. The guide needs more silence. It needs listening. We need to sit in silence sometimes. We need to be able to listen to ourselves, to our bodies, to our thoughts, to our feelings. Two of the most effective ways to do that and to develop that guide place are mindfulness and therapy. I've already talked about in these previous steps, we're developing it anyway, and it's present. It's present anyway within you. We're just trying to put more energy into it. Certainly mindfulness, as I say, would be the gold standard for doing that. The reason I focus on mindfulness in this video rather than therapy is a really good way of doing it as well. I think of developing that observing part, of developing that buffer, of noticing what I'm doing and why, and drawing links and deciding what I might do differently. But the reason I don't focus on therapy as much in this video is mindfulness is free, and it's something that you can do all the time. We have access to it, which I'll explain in the various different ways constantly. It's free. The focusing on the breath, focusing on the present moment, sensations, sounds, bird song, temperature on the skin, those are things that are accessible to you all the time for nothing, and they're a great way of developing that observing part. So as I say, that's why I focus on mindfulness here. But talking some more about mindfulness then, what mindfulness is, as I say, it's this present moment awareness. So it's awareness of what's happening now, not what happened yesterday, not what I'm going to do this afternoon or tomorrow, not even about creative imagination about what I want from the future, but it's focusing on present moment awareness. And I think when you combine that present moment awareness, so knowing what's happening internally for thoughts, feelings and body, with some activism. So a lot of mindfulness is about letting things pass, just noticing, let it pass. I also think, as you will have seen from the past, we need to combine that at times with activism internally. So really encouraging those thoughts of gratitude and feelings of gratitude, for example, or feelings of love and trust and patience and forgiveness. But I think we do need to deliberately do that sometimes, or quite a lot of the time probably. If we're in dominant threat, we need to be doing that quite a lot of the time. But if you combine, the mindfulness, present moment awareness with also some activism internally, I think your well-being is going to be largely under your control. Of course, none of us can control external horrendous things that happen, and sometimes those things do happen. But I think what you'll have seen through these videos is that a lot of the distress that happens internally for us with that dominant threat part is actually happening a lot in our imagination. The dominant reward, the addiction to dependencies, again, that's an internal experience. That's something we're doing based on this compulsive reward system that we can get into. So what we're looking at here is if we have this strong guide who's controlling these parts, who's combining letting go when we need to with enhancing when that's helpful, with connection often, means that our well-being is going to be under our control. So what mindfulness does is it plugs you into your self, all aspects of self, thought, feelings, body. You can notice the flow of thoughts, that sort of thought soup. Notice I've already said 50 to 70,000 thoughts today. That is a lot of thinking. That's a lot of images, a lot of memories. But mindfulness helps you to plug into that, drop inside and plug into that, your thoughts, your sensations, your feelings. And you can see actually that as they flow, if you just allow them to flow, sometimes they change. Well, in fact, most of the time they'll change. that they're just passing pieces of human experience. And that's what the point that I've been making in the past about thoughts. We get consumed by the fear, get consumed by anger, and the rewards, the dominant reward, the addictions and dependencies. But what we can see when we develop that observing part is that they're much more, through this mindfulness place, this more mindful place, is that they're, all of these aspects of self are just passing pieces of human experience. So we don't want to latch on to some and ride them. And there are others that we want to, as I say, increase and enhance in our bodies. But the point is that they are just aspects of experience. So we need to be able to accept what is. We don't turn against any of them. We're not criticizing them. But mindfulness enables us to notice what's happening, to notice what's flowing through, and then we can decide what we're going to allow or expand and receive, and then also what we're going to interrupt the progression of and let pass. So that would be the more unhelpful threat, the rehearsal of arguments, the thoughts that are about low self-esteem and the fact I'm a loser or failure or whatever that be. The comparisons are another thing that I think can be helpful to let go of. This, well, like other people are doing that, why aren't I doing this? They look happy, I don't. They seem to be able to do life better than me. Those kind of thoughts, we need to be able to notice them and let them pass. And I think mindfulness practice and developing that guide within us allows us much more to do that. So mindfulness is very much about listening. It's very much about, as I say, noticing, observing, as well as all the talking and doing that we do in life. It's all about balance, isn't it? So we need to be able to notice and listen internally, and also notice and listen with other people, but combine that with the talking and doing in life. So reducing the outside input and increasing the inside output. I just talked about that in terms of mindfulness, noticing our internal experience and then allowing us to make decisions based on that. So that is much more inward out than thinking about, well, I should do this because other people do, or other people would expect me to do that, or they're doing that, so I'm going to do this even more, or whatever it might be. Mindfulness and that focus internally, that guide looking at the different parts of us and the messages that they're all giving us, and the signals that are coming from our feelings, the signals that are coming from threat, signals that are coming from connection. It's really allowing us to go inside out to the world rather than, as I say, scanning the environment or comparing. So making our decisions and life choices and decisions about behaviours and who we spend time with based on what other people seem to be doing or what other people think we should do and tell us to do. So mindfulness is about slowing down, stopping, being silent. It can be done with the eyes closed. Some people struggle with it. People have been traumatized in the past. Something like mindfulness they can find very difficult because they'll be left with flashbacks or traumatic scenes internally, and it can be quite distressing. I'll talk about that as far as more active ways to be mindful, perhaps, that don't involve closing the eyes. But if that isn't a difficulty for you, that exercise of closing your eyes, listening to yourself, stopping, is a key thing to be developing here. We need to see that, I think, as essential self-care. Some people would describe it as doing nothing. You may describe sitting down, listening to yourself, sitting in the garden as doing nothing. There is absolutely, to me, no such thing as doing nothing. If I'm sitting down or even going for a walk alone, I am not doing nothing. I can be noticing what I feel about things. I could be noticing, we're talking about that present moment awareness, the sight, sound, smells around me, the temperature on my skin. I can have been having thoughts of gratitude. If I'm going for a walk, I could be regulating my nervous system probably, which makes me much more productive for work, which makes my personal relationships much more likely to go well. So there is no such thing here as doing nothing anymore. I hope that it is productive to be mindful, that it's productive to slow down, to drop inside and to look at what's happening as far as my internal experience. I mentioned this in the context of the body. Very important to hold on to through all this, that your mind assumes that if your body isn't worried, then the mind must be safe, that the body must be safe, so it can calm down, it can slow down, which will allow much more space for these connection thoughts of the gratitude, the love, the creativity that we're looking for. But mindfulness generally can calm the body, regulates the nervous system. I talked about it in the context of the body. A body-based balancer, again, I would say that mindfulness is, assuming that's your experience of it. I mean, as I said, some people who are very traumatized, they really struggle with mindfulness. So if that is the case with you, then obviously we can try other things and don't focus on trying to do something which is really distressing you. I mean, a lot of people just find it difficult to start with the mindfulness because there's such a lot of activity. There's been such a history of dominant threat and over arousal that to sit with mindfulness is just very uncomfortable for them, and they think they're doing it wrong. If it's just, I say just difficult, but if it's about it being difficult, then I would persist with it. If closing your eyes or sitting alone is traumatizing, then obviously we need to look at something else there. But the basic point that if we're using mindfulness to keep our nervous system, our body in a regulated state, then, as I've already said, this bottom up calms the thoughts. So what does mindfulness do? That present moment awareness, it uses anchors for attention in the present moment. So they will be bodily sensations are a good one, I think, for us, because it's also connecting mind and body and noticing how alive the body is. So it's coming away, and it's the other room from that threat part that sees the body as a problem. Bodily sensations, as I say, focusing on them. We're looking at, we can see the aliveness of it all, the fact that there is no such thing as doing nothing with the body. It's always working, it's always moving, it's always processing, it's always doing things internally. So bodily sensations, the senses, what you can see, hear, touch, taste, smell, all very good from a present moment awareness point of view, really good for anchors. And of course the breath, which is the big one for mindfulness, is focusing on the breath. Great things about these, as I've already said, they are always accessible to you and they're free. So whether you are in the garden or even with a friend, you can notice your senses. You can notice what you feel like in the chair, what clothing feels like on your body. That dual awareness of being able to listen to somebody else, but also being able to focus internally on what's happening to you and your body. The reason why the breath is really good, I think, focusing on the breath as well, is that it's one place to anchor to, and it's also around the chest, which is that area where we feel love and connection often. So as far as practically mindfulness and exercises of focusing on the breath, if you want to start with something like that or just introduce that as a practice into life, what I would suggest is breathing into your abdomen. So making sure that it's sort of diaphragm breathing rather than shallow breathing up here of that threat place. So even put your hand on your tummy to make sure that your hand is going up and down, that your diaphragm is going up and down, that your tummy is going up and down when you're breathing. So, focusing your attention on that, slowing the breath is a great way of coming into present moment awareness, therefore focusing on what's happening and turning your attention inside. So we need a soft belly. As far as, counting in and out, I think in 3 and out 5, because you're breathing out for longer. Again, it brings you into land rather than taking in sharp breaths up here. To breathe out for longer than you breathe in. So in 3 and out 5, I find calming. Some people make it even longer, in 5 and out 7. And importantly, breathing in through your nose and out through your mouth. So that, because if you breathe in through your mouth, it can be taking in too much oxygen. So your nostrils control the intake of oxygen better. So breathing in through your nose and out through your mouth. And I think if you'll find that you could do that for a minute or two, it will really calm your nervous system, it will really focus your attention on the present, and it will give that guide part of you what it needs. Internal focus, gives a calm nervous system, because of course what happens if our nervous system becomes aroused is fear steps forward, anger steps forward and pushes the guide out of the way effectively, and we can get reactive and get caught in that. Same with the dominant reward place, that place of over arousal and impulsivity. That can push forward and push the guide out of the way, and then we act out in a way that we didn't want to again. So calm nervous system, that the thing that mindfulness hopefully will help you to achieve, that regulated body, that regulated nervous system, is what we're looking for here. Attention inwards, time to listen, time to relax, time to feel calm. But just to focus on the breath without even changing it, I think can be very helpful. So allow yourself to be breathed. A lot of the threat part likes to control, likes to change things, and just to notice the breath and that it's happening without you trying to control it, that the basic act of living and surviving happens without you having to do anything, can be quite calming, I find. So that just even focusing on that natural ebb and flow in the present moment of the breath, again it's focusing on the body, it's focusing on lower down rather than a lot of the thoughts up here, and the mentalizing and the intellectualizing of things is taking your attention to that place of lower down where love is and sits, I think, and then calmness. So those are more structured things as far as, mindful exercises with breathing. But if you notice one thought, one anger thought, and allow it to pass, then you've been mindful. If you walk down the street and notice, the heat on different parts of your skin, if you walk past a row of shops and notice different smells as you go past, you've been mindful, because again, it's present moment awareness, using your senses of your breath. Even if you notice a thought, notice a feeling, it's all mindfulness. It's all present moment awareness of your experience. And growing the guide part, growing the observing part of you, that's going to enable you to make sure that all those different internal parts are working for you and in your best interests. Some people really struggle with mindfulness. If your activity's been very high up here with lots of doing, lots of fears, lots of anger, lots of worries, lots of stress, the whole act of sitting with your internal experience can be very difficult. So for those people that really struggle with it, doing things that are active but mindful, like eating, gardening, cleaning, making things, crafting, drawing, showering, those are all, again, very good ways to get into the present moment and have that present moment awareness. With making things, it is sensory. You are using touch. With cooking, it is touch, smell, sounds. So they're all good ways of getting into that present moment through your senses, but more active ways. So if you do struggle with mindfulness, then try to integrate it in other ways into life, that more present moment awareness. So as I've said, eating and showering are very good. Showering in the morning, have a mindful shower. So notice where the heat and the water hits your body. What parts of your body are warm? What parts of your body are cool? What does it sound like? Same with eating. When you take a mouthful of food, really notice what it tastes like, what the textures are like in your mouth, sounds, all those things. Again, all ways to anchor ourselves within the body, to draw attention into the body, bodily processes, sensations. So we're connecting mind and body. We're dropping inside, and we're also doing that present moment awareness. As far as empathy with self, as I said, some people find it very difficult. They think they're doing it wrong. They criticize themselves. That threat part says you're doing it wrong. You can't do it, as it does with lots of things. Please try and persist with it. Thank you to the threat part for those comments, but we're going to go ahead and do it anyway. It will make it difficult for you. If you've been used to having huge amounts of activity, the mindfulness will be difficult, but always there's no wrong way of doing it. It's, persisting with it, and also small amounts of it are cumulative. So just doing 10 minutes a day or even 5 minutes a day really does build up over time. But as I've said, if a formal mindfulness practice, bringing that into life is something that you find very difficult, just try and do it in other ways. Try and drive mindfully. Try and eat mindfully, shower mindfully, whatever that might be. Apps can be great for this. Headspace, Calm, probably apps that you've heard of, but they are, they're all about mindfulness. And I find somebody else talking me through mindfulness to be really helpful. The more you do it, the more helpful you find it. You internalize and integrate those processes and do it yourself naturally over time. That will happen. But at least at the beginning, when most of what's happening is decades of busyness and problem solving, and for somebody externally to talk you through it in a calm way, to do it in that sort of structured way and to have that guidance through it is really helpful. And then, of course, you internalize that guidance. It's the same thing with therapy. We internalize something from being in relationship with another person, whether that's a therapist or, in this case, somebody talking you through something on an app. So apps like Headspace and Calm people find incredibly helpful. I would use Insight Timer, which is I don't know that a huge amount about Headspace and Calm. I know that people speak very highly of those apps, and there are lots more besides. So just have a look and find the one that works for you. Find the voice that you like. Find the sort of guidance that resonates most with you, that you most enjoy. Insight Timer is the one that I would use. As I've said, it's got thousands of meditations and mindfulness exercises on it about self-compassion, gratitude, helping you to get to sleep. There are ones for teenagers, ones around anger, meaning and purpose in life, meditations about creativeness, chakras, so focusing attention inwards, body scans, really good. Whatever voice you like, that's the great thing about it, I think, is finding that person or people that help you in this situation. Some people really gel with a particular person talking them through it. Other people, it sets their teeth on edge. So there's so many things out there, and as I say, Insight Timer is completely free. And the other good thing about something like Insight Timer as well is you get, and I think some of the other apps work in this way, is that you get a sort of progress chart too. So on Insight Timer you get a number of stars for doing it in a row. Doing the meditations or mindfulness exercises days in a row, and that's good because it's using your reward part, the dopamine you get from achieving 10 days unbroken in a row, using that as a way to incentivize you to do it as well. So have a look at them, have a look at what works for you and what you like, and hopefully you can bring them into your life. But I really would suggest that that's sort of top of the list or near the top of the list as far as bringing things into life from this point on. And just a word about therapy. As I've said, I would advocate that endlessly for people. I mean, therapists are different. Of course they are. They're as unique as every human being. So therapy can be different for everybody. It's a combination of a different person with a different client. There is no standard type of therapy. But therapy, for me, if we look at connecting it with the things that I've just been talking about, it's really encouraging that observing part of self, looking at why I do things, the patterns that I engage in the room with the therapist, what I set up as far as the dynamic. Do I take space? Do I use humour to avoid? What am I like with boundaries? I'm going to come on to boundaries in a subsequent video. You can really look at all those things in a confidential, safe, non-judgmental space. As I say, though, therapists have done varying degrees of work as far as their own internal experience. So also do trust your own internal experience as far as what happens around the therapist. But I talk more about therapy, about how to get the best of it through my language, I suppose, in a video that I've put on YouTube. So getting the best of therapy, and also in the book, I talk about much more about therapy and how it can be helpful and why it can be helpful. As I say, in this, though, I've focused on mindfulness just because it's much more accessible. It's there potentially every minute of the day for you. So I hope that's been helpful. In the next video, I'm going to talk about the next 2 steps, which are using your creative imagination and enjoying yourself. So I shall see you there.